those women shit. I'll start again. Take two. Well, fuck. Oh, shit, I've said fuck. Oh, fuck, I've said shit. No, look. I named this ship for the City Anne, and God save all those who sail in there. Upper. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck, I've said shit. Ah, shit, I said fuck. No, there was a woman down the alleyway, Mrs. Holmes, and she's going to report me for saying bugger, you know. Oh, just wait till I see your mother. You're in real trouble. Oh, I say, well, if you're going to go and see her, then tell her this booger-shaped, fuck-shaped, fucking sphincter, arsehole up your ass, up your cunt, fuck you sideways, you fucking boring fucking whore, fuck off, you cow! So go and fucking repeat that to my mother.
It was Henry's turn to take the express, as Gordon was called away to work in the shunting yard. He didn't like this at all. As engines passed Gordon in the yard, they'd make rude comments, and the trucks would join in too. "James is right, you know, you're too high maintenance," said one, "and you've got more bags under your eyes than you could ever carry." Another added, "You trucks are too noisy. You should know your place and keep quiet." But the trucks didn't. They kept making fun of him wherever he went. Eventually, Gordon had enough. "If you can't learn your place, I shall put you in it." And he hit the trucks hard. Too hard. "You big clumsy oaf!" They laughed. Gordon felt most embarrassed. That night the other engines laughed too. "Oh, no one has a spotless record." "Arthur does," Thomas added. "What about the time he crashed into the vans?" "That was my fault, really. He's never had a proper accident." "Does that mean he's more important than you, Gordon?" laughed James. Gordon was not amused. The next morning, Gordon was still working in the yard and was grumbling to himself. "Arthur will slip up one day, and then he'll get into a sticky mess again, just like before." The trucks giggled. They had forgotten about Arthur's incident, but now it was all they could talk about. Meanwhile, Percy was in high spirits. As he came to the fishing village, he saw Arthur. "Any accidents lately?" asked Percy jokingly. "None at all," Arthur proudly replied. "Why'd you ask?" "Well, we were talking about your spotless record last night. Well, except for that time with Thomas, of course." "Please," he said. "I don't like to talk about that. I was teased about it for weeks by the trucks." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realise. Still, at least the trucks seem to have forgotten, haven't they?" said Percy, trying to make up for what he had said. "I suppose," Arthur said, as he calmly puffed away. Later, Arthur was on the main line collecting trucks for the village. "Look, it's the Champ Tart!" one began. "You look good enough to eat," another continued. Soon all of the trucks were calling Arthur names. Wherever Arthur went, the trucks kept on going. Arthur tried to keep calm as best as he could, but eventually he couldn't take it any longer. If you trucks can't behave, then we'll just not go any further. And he came to a stop. The trucks giggled, deciding what to do next. Then, they all became very silent. "Thank you," said Arthur. "Now we can continue." But he couldn't. The trucks wouldn't let him. They had put their brakes on. "You're too sickly for us. We refuse to go any further until the clean engine arrives," they demanded. "I am a clean engine," retorted Arthur, and he pulled as hard as he could, but still the trucks didn't move. "You smell like a fish cake," a truck teased, but Arthur wasn't listening anymore. He was too busy trying to get the trucks to move. Then, one of the couplings broke. Arthur tried to stop as best as he could, but he had built up too much steam. He rounded a bend and ended up in a lake. The trucks laughed and laughed. "Fishy engines should go in the sea, not a lake," they chuckled. Arthur felt awful. Eventually, Thomas arrived to help. He was surprised. "Oh no, Arthur! You've broken your spotless record! Properly this time!" But Arthur felt too ashamed to say anything. Once he was repaired, he puffed off sadly to his shed. Meanwhile, Thomas returned to his own, not sure what to think. He told Percy what had happened with Arthur. However, someone else had heard Thomas. Gordon felt very pleased. Gordon was feeling full of himself. At long last, he was back to pulling the express, and he would soon pass someone very important. Someone he had heard a secret about. Soon, Gordon found him. Arthur was waiting with his empty trucks. They were going to be filled with fish. "Hello? I say, can you smell something damp?" Gordon asked. "Well, we are by the sea." No, closer than that. It's almost as if it's staring me right in the face. Well, it can't be these trucks. This is their first run of the day, and they're as clean as a whistle. Then perhaps it's you. And as for whistles, I don't expect yours is very clean, especially after your dip in the lake, Gordon cruelly finished. Arthur had hoped that only Thomas knew. "Oh, so you heard about that?" he said, staring at the rails. "Heard about it? Why, the whole island knows about it!" Gordon laughed as he smugly puffed away. Then, In a quiet voice he said, "Well, they will soon enough. Then we'll see who's the important engine." Later, Thomas was dropping off some scrap iron. Nearby, he saw that George had a smirk on his face. Oh no. Every time you have a smile on your face, trouble's not far behind. "Not for me, Thomas. I'm winning." Winning what? "Don't pretend you don't know. The rails are being ripped up. That's why your friend took to the lake with his trucks. He's trying to swim away from the scrap heap." Thomas was surprised. "How do you know? The only engine I told was Percy." Then he had a thought. Unless someone was listening in. And I bet I know who. Oh, well, don't worry. After all, it might be you in that scrap train next," he said. Just then the foreman ran up. "Good work, George. Now you're needed at the fishing village." Looks like I'll get to thank him personally," George called to Thomas as he staggered away. When George arrived, the workers and a crane were loading some fish into trucks. George didn't like the smell of fish at all. "Ugh, what's that horrible smell? How can these men put up with it?" "Shush, you'll upset them. Now I need to find out where we're needed. Don't offend anyone," replied his driver as he walked away. "Bah, I can offend anyone I like." Just then he saw Arthur puffing up to the trucks, and as if to prove a point, he shouted across, "Oh look, it's the engine who liked the smell of fish so much, he tried to be one." Arthur heard the insult but continued on. "If I lose my temper, I'll make another mistake," he thought. George didn't think Arthur could hear. "Just you wait till my driver comes back, then I'll shout it right down your funnel." But he didn't need to wait. George's driver hadn't set George's lever properly, and suddenly George started to move. George laughed until he realised where he was heading. Towards the crane. He tried to stop, but it was no good. He crashed into it, making it break and dropping the fish right on top of him. "Who's the fishy engine now?" Arthur chuckled as he came to a stop beside the commotion. George was about to retort when he heard a voice. "And what is this?" boomed the Fat Controller. "If it were anyone else, I'd have questions, but you, George, have something of a track record." George didn't say much after that. The Fat Controller watched as Arthur helped clear the mess. Then he spoke to him. "Now, for my original reason for coming here. I realise you'd like to repair your image with the other engines, and so I," he grandly announced, "have a very special job for you." Arthur couldn't help but smile. This was his chance to prove himself. Ever since Arthur started working along the fishing village, the company was more profitable than it had ever been. All day Arthur worked hard taking trucks to where they were needed. It had been a year since he had joined, and the fishing company had decided to hold the parade. "The fishing company wants you to be at the head of the parade. You'll travel across the island, and I'm sure it will make everyone forget about your recent mishap," the Fat Controller announced. Arthur felt very proud. "Oh, thank you, sir," he said. It wasn't long until the news spread. "I can't wait to see it," called Percy. "Arthur certainly deserves the reward," Edward replied. "And why's that?" Gordon fumed. "He's not an important engine. Why should anyone want to look at him?" Thomas had had enough. "Because Arthur doesn't listen to other engines' conversations," Thomas snapped. "This is just the break Arthur needs after your gossiping." "Pah," Gordon retorted. He was still cross the next day. "I don't gossip," he retorted. "I just showed Arthur as the pretender he is. And to think," he continued, "that I have to take the supplies for this ridiculous parade. Why didn't the Fat Controller ask Thomas to take them? He's the one who seems to think Arthur's so important." He was so cross that he wasn't paying attention. Ahead, the rails remained slimy from where George's fish had landed the day before. Gordon approached the siding much too fast. He slid on the rails and pushed his trucks into the sea. Gordon watched as the trucks fell helplessly into the depths below. Later that evening, the trucks had been rescued, but the supplies were ruined. Gordon was about to retort when he saw Arthur sat nearby, unable to say anything. Gordon felt ashamed. He could see how upset Arthur was, and he knew that it was all his fault. "I'm sorry I ruined your parade," he said feebly. Arthur sadly looked over. "There's no need to be sorry," he replied. "I'm not an important engine. I deserve to be in disgrace." This made Gordon feel even worse. He'd managed to convince himself that Arthur was a pompous engine. Now he realised that Arthur just wanted to be useful, like everyone else. I'll try to help. Somehow," he said, as he shamefully took the trucks away and went to the sheds. The next day, Arthur hadn't moved. There were no fish to deliver, and he couldn't see how Gordon could help. It had all been ruined. Just then, the fishermen walked happily up. Arthur thought they didn't know the news, but they had a surprise for him instead. "What are you moping around here for?" one laughed. "You've got a train to pull." Arthur was confused. "But there are no deliveries today," he said. But the fisherman just laughed. "Come on, there's no time for dawdling." As Arthur rounded the bend, he was surprised. Ahead sat the parade train, undamaged and ready to go. "But how?" asked Arthur in bewilderment. "The supplies are ruined." "We'll find out later," the driver laughed. "Right now, we've got a parade to lead." For the first time in a long while, Arthur was chuffing happily down the track. Everywhere he went, crowds cheered and engines whistled. He felt that he could burst with joy. "This," he exclaimed, "is the best day I've ever had." Before he knew it, he was approaching Knapford Station. All of his friends were there whistling him on. Arthur smiled, but barely noticed them. In a siding, he saw Gordon sat next to the Fat Controller, feeling miserable. Arthur wanted to ask what was happening, but didn't want to stop the celebrations. Finally, the parade came to a stop, and the workmen began to dismantle the float. Arthur was having a nice long drink when Gordon puffed up. "Ah, there you are," he said happily. "How was the parade? It looked wonderful." "Oh, it was," exclaimed Arthur. "I had a great time." "But it looked like you didn't. What was wrong?" "Ah, that. I was told off for not taking my trains," started Gordon. Arthur was once again confused. "But why didn't you take them?" Gordon smiled. "Because I was too busy looking for supplies for your train," he answered. Arthur didn't know what to say. "So, you saved the parade?" "Oh, thank you, Gordon. You have no idea how grateful I am." But Gordon stopped him. "There's no need to thank me," he said. "Especially not after how horrible I've been to you. Spreading gossip, making fun of you. I thought you were the one being pompous, but I should have been looking at myself." "Would you like to be friends?" replied Arthur. "I'd like nothing more," Gordon beamed. When Arthur got back home, he sat in his shed thinking about the day he had had. Maybe I am a useful engine, after all. Summer's day, you will find Thomas the Tank Engine puffing happily down the line. Today, however, was not one of these days. There was someone that Thomas didn't want to bump into. "Oh, I hope he's not there," Thomas complained to his driver. Unfortunately, he was. Next to where the road was being repaired, George sat looking annoyed. As soon as he saw Thomas, he began to complain. "And where have you been?" he grumbled. "No wonder you engines are on the way out. A lorry could get here in twice the time." "A lorry couldn't have brought you all of this in one trip," wheezed Thomas. "You should be grateful." "Bah!" George retorted. "I don't say thank you to scrap iron." Later that day, George was still cross. "Railways are no good, turn them into roads," he chanted even louder. He was so cross that he wasn't paying attention. Suddenly, there was a crunch as the rail was flattened by George's steamroller wheels. "Oops," he said. Just then he heard a whistle in the distance. "He's going to derail. I think it would be best if I weren't here," he thought as he quietly skulked away. Then there was trouble. The building supplies laid across the track, and a surprised Arthur sat in the middle of it all. No one knew how it happened, except George, as he disappeared from view with a grin on his face. It wasn't long until Thomas arrived to help clear the mess. But as the breakdown cranes cleared the mess, another visitor arrived. "If you're here to make fun of Arthur again," Thomas crossly began, but Gordon stopped him. "I wouldn't dream of it," said Gordon sheepishly. "We're friends now," smiled Arthur. "Then why are you here?" Thomas asked. "I've got a message from the Fat Controller," Gordon replied. "Arthur is to be sent for repairs, and you, Thomas, must work at the village." Thomas looked disappointed. He wasn't looking forward to working with fish again. The next day, Thomas had a miserable day. He hated fish, and having to spend all day around them only made him more grateful to have Arthur around. "I don't know what Arthur sees in these stinky fish," he complained. He missed the countryside, he missed Annie and Clarabelle, and he even missed the trucks. "At least they aren't slimy," he muttered. His driver tried to cheer him up. "You're being a really useful engine. I'm sure that Arthur will appreciate the help." This made Thomas feel a little better. Meanwhile, George wasn't having a good day either. With Thomas working at the fishing village, there was no one to bring him the supplies. As he drove along the road, he rocked from side to side. Suddenly, he swerved into a pothole. "Where is that Thomas?" he complained to a nearby worker. "He says about how useful he is, and then doesn't turn up when I see that lazy, useless Not Thomas's fault," interrupted the worker. "He's had to take over Arthur's jobs because of yesterday's incident." George stopped complaining at once. "It's my fault," he muttered to himself. "I should have never knocked into those rails." "So it was you," replied the worker. He had heard everything. George widened his eyes. What I mean is, I shall speak to the Fat Controller at once." When he arrived, he was very cross. "It would seem that wherever you go, there is always some confusion and delay. When will you learn to only flatten the things you are told to? My railway is not your playground." Yes, sir," stammered George. But nothing," snapped the Fat Controller. "I shall put you where even you'll find it difficult to cause any damage, and you'll stay there until I can decide what to do with you." For months, George sat in a field unable to do anything. Engines would often pass and make fun of him. He didn't feel so important now. Eventually, after promising that he'd behave, he was able to work again. And for a while, George didn't cause any trouble. Watch what you're doing, you useless puffball! What? Railways are no good! Turn them into roads! Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Railways are no... Oh. Maybe one day his good behaviour will last.